Before we dive into tonight's stories, let me ask you something. Have you ever felt that moment when fun turns to pure terror? That split second when your brain realizes something is deeply, fundamentally wrong? Tonight, I'm sharing 3 true stories that'll make you think twice about midnight adventures. We've got friends who stumbled upon something watching them from the darkness below, teenagers who invited something they couldn't uninvite, and a camping trip that proved not everyone wearing a ranger vest is there to help you. These aren't creepy pastas or urban legends. These are real experiences from real people who were just looking for a good time and found something they'll never forget. So, if you're home alone right now, maybe turn on some extra lights. If you're wearing headphones, maybe take one out. And if you're the kind of person who loves that delicious feeling of dread creeping up your spine, then you're in exactly the right place. Hit that like button if you're ready to lose some sleep tonight. Subscribe if you want more true horror stories, and let's get into it. But fair warning, after these stories, you might never look at hiking trails, forest clearings, or late-night adventures the same way again.
Some invitations shouldn't be sent, especially when you don't know what's waiting to RSVP. I need to tell you something about myself at 17. I was an idiot. Not the harmless kind of idiot who fails a driver's test or accidentally dyes their hair green. The dangerous kind. The kind who thinks they're invincible, who treats the world like one big dare. My friends and I were obsessed with the weird corners of the internet back then. The forums with black backgrounds and red text, where people shared real paranormal experiences and supposedly authentic rituals. We didn't actually believe any of it, not really. It was all just theater, a way to feel edgy and rebellious without actually doing anything truly stupid. Except one night, we did do something truly stupid. And whatever we invited into that clearing, I think part of it followed me home.
It was Mike's idea, which should tell you everything you need to know about how well this was going to go. Mike was the kind of guy who'd eat something just because you dared him to, who'd climb onto roofs for no reason, who treated common sense like a suggestion rather than a rule. "I found something," he announced one Friday night as we sat in his basement, passing around energy drinks and pretending we had better things to do. He pulled out a crumpled printout, actual paper, which should have been our first red flag. It's called the witness ritual. Supposedly lets you see things that are normally hidden. "Hidden like what?" Jenny asked, twirling her dyed black hair around one finger. "Ghosts? Demons? Your dad's browser history?" "Funny," Mike said flatly. "Says here it reveals those who walk between, whatever that means." I grabbed the paper. The instructions were written in that try-hard, creepy font people use when they want to seem mysterious. Draw a circle, light candles at the cardinal points, chant this specific phrase 9 times, wait for a sign. Standard internet occult nonsense. "This is stupid," I said. Then, because I was 17 and therefore legally required to contradict myself, "We should totally do it." That's how we ended up hiking 2 miles into Foster's Woods at 11 o'clock at night, armed with stolen candles from Jenny's mom's yoga room, a cigarette lighter, and a confidence completely unearned by our collective life experience. The clearing we found felt wrong from the start. I know that sounds like something from a bad horror movie, but I swear the air was different there. Thicker somehow. Heavier. The kind of atmosphere that makes your ears feel pressurized, like you're descending in an airplane. Even our flashlight beams looked dimmer, the light seeming to get absorbed by the darkness rather than cutting through it. "This is perfect," Mike said, which should have been our cue to leave. We drew the circle in the dirt using a stick. It looked more like a lumpy potato than a perfect circle, but we figured close enough. The candles kept blowing out until we managed to shield them with our bodies, creating these weird dancing shadows that made the trees look like they were moving. "Okay, everyone ready?" Mike asked, holding up the printout. "This is so dumb," Jenny muttered, but she was smiling. We were all smiling. This was fun, right? This was just a story we'd tell at parties later, laugh about over college break. The chant was in some language I didn't recognize. Latin, maybe? Or something someone made up to sound like Latin. We stumbled through it together, our voices not quite synchronized, giggling when someone messed up a syllable. Then, around the 7th repetition, the wind stopped. Not gradually, just stopped, like someone had flipped a switch. The candle flames went completely vertical and still. Even the normal sounds of the woods, insects, rustling leaves, distant animal calls, went silent. That's when Mike stopped chanting mid-word and pointed toward the trees.
The man was standing about 20 feet away, just at the edge where our candlelight met the darkness. He wasn't emerging from behind a tree or walking toward us. He was just there, like he'd always been there and we'd only now noticed. He looked completely normal. That was the worst part. He was wearing a flannel shirt, jeans, work boots. He could have been someone's dad or uncle, someone you'd see at a hardware store on a Saturday morning. His hair was dark, his build average, unremarkable in every way except for the fact that he was standing perfectly, unnaturally still in the middle of the woods at midnight, and he was staring directly at us. Hello? Jenny called out, her voice cracking. We're leaving. Sorry if this is your spot or whatever." The man didn't respond, didn't move, but then our candlelight caught his eyes. They reflected the light back at us, bright, almost metallic, the way a cat's or deer's eyes shine in headlights. But wrong. The reflection was too steady, too intense. Human eyes don't do that. "What the fuck?" Mike breathed beside me. I wanted to run. Every nerve in my body was screaming at me to move, but I was frozen, locked in place by the absolute wrongness of what I was seeing. This man who looked so human, but stood so inhuman, whose eyes caught light like he was something else wearing a person's shape. Then he opened his mouth and started chanting. It was our chant, the same words we'd been saying, but his voice was impossible. It sounded like two people speaking in perfect unison, one voice deep and one high, creating this harmonic effect that made my teeth ache and my stomach turn. The words came out in that same rhythmic pattern, but hearing it from him made the syllables sound ancient and intentional and deeply, fundamentally wrong. "Go!" I shouted, and we went. We didn't even try to grab the candles or the printout. We just ran, crashing through underbrush and low branches, our flashlights bouncing wildly. I could hear Jenny sobbing as she ran, Mike swearing in a continuous, terrified stream. Behind us, or maybe in my head, I could still hear that dual-voiced chanting following us through the trees. I tripped over a root I didn't see, went down hard, and felt something slice across my palm as I caught myself on a rock. The pain was sharp and immediate, but I was up again in a second, running with blood dripping between my fingers. We didn't stop until we hit the road. None of us looked back. It wasn't until I got home, shaking and bleeding in my bathroom, that I realized my phone was gone. Dropped somewhere in that clearing probably, or along the path during our panicked escape. I didn't go back for it, not the next day, not ever. But 3 nights later, my old number called my house at 3 a.m. When I answered, I heard wind, and underneath it, that same rhythmic chanting in that impossible dual voice. It's been 5 years, and I still get those calls. I've changed numbers 3 times. They always find me. And I know we left something unfinished in those woods. some door we opened that we never properly closed. Sometimes I think about that man in the flannel shirt with the animal eyes. I wonder if he's still standing there in that clearing, waiting for us to come back and finish what we started. And I wonder how many other stupid kids have found that same ritual, drawn that same circle, and invited something in that they had no business calling.
Not all park rangers are there to help you find your way. Some are there to make sure you never do. Let me be clear about something. I'm not an outdoorsy person. I don't romanticize getting back to nature or disconnecting from technology. Camping, to me, means dealing with mosquitoes, sleeping on rocks, and squatting behind trees to pee. I'm the guy who brings hand sanitizer on hikes and complains about the lack of cell service. So when my cousin Derek convinced me to spend a weekend at some remote state park, it wasn't because I was excited about the adventure. It was because I'm a sucker who can't say no to family. I should have trusted my instincts. I should have stayed home. Because what happened on that trail changed something fundamental in how I see the world. Now I know that some places don't want visitors, and some things in those places make that very, very clear.
"It'll be fun," Derek had said over the phone. "Just 2 nights, some easy trails, fresh air. You need to get out of that apartment." What he didn't mention was that easy trails meant bushwhacking through unmarked wilderness, or that fresh air came with humidity so thick you could chew it. But there I was, sweating through my brand new REI shirt that still had the tags on it that morning, following Derek deeper into Foster Creek State Park. The park itself was beautiful in that aggressively natural way that makes city people like me uncomfortable. Too many trees, too much silence, too much space where anything could be hiding. The official trails were fine, well-maintained, clearly marked, the kind of paths where you'd encounter families with toddlers and retirees with walking sticks. But Derek wanted to find the waterfall. "It's not on any of the maps," he'd explained that morning, showing me some Reddit post from a hiking forum. "You have to go off-trail near mile marker 7, supposed to be this amazing hidden spot that hardly anyone knows about." "If it's not on the maps, maybe there's a reason," I'd pointed out. He just grinned. "Where's your sense of adventure?" So we'd left the marked trail around 3 in the afternoon, following Derek's downloaded GPS coordinates and his completely unjustified confidence. The waterfall, when we found it, was admittedly pretty cool, a 30-foot cascade into a clear pool surrounded by moss-covered rocks and the kind of pristine scenery you see on desktop wallpapers. We'd taken our photos, eaten our granola bars, and started heading back around 5:30. That's when things got weird. The sun was dropping fast, painting everything in that golden orange light that looks beautiful in pictures, but means you're running out of daylight. The shadows stretched long and strange between the trees, turning familiar shapes into something other. And I kept hearing something. Footsteps, maybe, or something moving through the brush parallel to our path. I'd stop to listen, and whatever it was would stop too, perfectly synchronized, like it was matching our rhythm. "You hear that?" I asked Derek. "Hear what?" "That, I don't know, something moving out there." Derek paused, tilting his head. The forest was full of the usual sounds: birds, wind through leaves, distant water. Probably just a deer, or we're spooking a turkey or something. But it didn't sound like a deer. It sounded deliberate. It sounded like someone was pacing us, staying just out of sight in the thick undergrowth, watching our progress. "Let's just get back to camp," I said, and I could hear the tension in my own voice. We walked faster. The sounds kept pace. And that's when we came around a bend and found ourselves at a fork in the trail, a genuine Y intersection with 2 paths diverging into the darkening woods.
"This wasn't here before," Derek said slowly. He was right. We'd come this way just a few hours ago, and there was one path, just one. Now there were two, and standing right in the middle where they split was a man, the tallest man I'd ever seen.
He must have been 7 feet tall, maybe more. In the fading light, it was hard to judge distances and proportions, but he towered over the landscape in a way that my brain stuttered. Humans aren't supposed to be shaped like that tall, that still. He was wearing a high-visibility vest, the neon yellow-green kind that park rangers and construction workers wear. Except his was filthy. I'm talking streaked with dirt, torn in places, stained with things I didn't want to identify. Underneath it, he wore what might have once been a brown uniform shirt, but it was in similar condition, grimy and ragged. But the worst part, the detail that made my stomach drop, was his feet. He wasn't wearing shoes. His bare feet were planted on the trail, and even from 30 feet away, I could see they were covered in dark scabs and what looked like old, crusted wounds. His toenails were black. He didn't move, didn't call out a greeting or warning. He just stood there with his arms spread wide, like a crossing guard stopping traffic, his face completely blank, no expression at all, not threatening, not welcoming, just empty. Excuse us, Derek called out, his voice artificially cheerful in that way people get when they're nervous. Just trying to get back to the campground. The man didn't respond, didn't lower his arms. The silence stretched out, broken only by the sound of wind in the trees and my own heartbeat hammering in my ears. Sir, Derek tried again, we need to get past. Nothing. Just that blank stare and those outstretched arms blocking both paths. Something in my hindbrain, the part that still remembers when humans were prey, started screaming. This was wrong. This person was wrong. We needed to leave, now, immediately. Didn't matter where we went as long as it was away from here. Derek, I whispered, we need to go. Go where? He's blocking both. I don't care. Back the way we came, through the woods, anywhere. Derek must have heard something in my voice, or maybe he was feeling it too, that primal wrongness. We both took a step backward. The tall man didn't move, but somehow he seemed more present, more solid, like our retreat had confirmed something for him. Then, without discussion or countdown, we both turned and ran. Not down either path, but straight back into the brush we'd emerged from, crashing through undergrowth and low branches. Thorns tore at my clothes and face. I twisted my ankle in a hole I didn't see. Derek was swearing in a breathless stream ahead of me. We didn't have flashlights out, didn't have any plan. We just moved on pure adrenaline and terror. We got lost, completely, hopelessly lost. We wandered for 4 hours in the dark until we finally stumbled onto a paved road and followed it back to the main park entrance, where we found actual park rangers closing up the visitor center. Did you see a really tall guy out there wearing a ranger vest? Derek asked them, still breathing hard. Like 7 feet, barefoot. His vest was all torn up. The two rangers exchanged looks. Nobody on staff fits that description, the woman said slowly, and nobody should be on the trails after dark. Where exactly did you see this person? We tried to explain, the fork in the trail, the hidden waterfall, but we couldn't really pinpoint it on their map. The rangers took our information, told us they'd send someone to check it out in the morning, but I could see the skepticism in their eyes. We packed up and left that night, didn't even stay for the second night we'd paid for. And I swear, ever since then, whenever I see someone wearing a high-visibility yellow vest, construction workers, crossing guards, actual park rangers, my stomach clenches, and I have to look at their feet just to make sure they're wearing shoes, just to make sure they're real. Some views are better left unseen. especially the ones that stare back. You know that feeling when something shifts from fun to wrong in the span of a heartbeat? When the air gets heavier and your instincts start screaming at you to leave? That's what happened to me and my friends 2 years ago during what was supposed to be a harmless midnight adventure. We were young, restless, and looking for a story to tell. Well, we got one, but it's the kind of story that still makes my hands shake when I talk about it. This isn't some campfire tale I'm embellishing for effect. This actually happened, and I still don't have an explanation that lets me sleep soundly.
The Airbnb was nice enough. One of those renovated farmhouses with exposed beams and a porch that wrapped around 3 sides. But by our 3rd night there, the 4 of us were going stir-crazy. The whole point of the trip was to disconnect, but disconnecting apparently meant sitting around playing cards and complaining about the weak Wi-Fi signal. "There's a lookout point," my friend Leo said, squinting at a hiking map we'd found in a drawer. "Says it's only about 1.5 miles from here. The Overlook, they call it. Supposed to have amazing views of the valley." "At midnight?" Sarah laughed, but I could see the spark of interest in her eyes. "Why not?" I shrugged. "We're already awake. Might as well do something memorable." That's how bad decisions start, isn't it? With a shrug and the word memorable. We grabbed flashlights, threw on hoodies, and headed out into the October darkness. The trail started behind the property, winding through thick woods that felt older than they probably were. Our flashlight beams cut through the darkness like we were spelunking instead of hiking, and every snapped twig under our feet sounded like a gunshot. But we were having fun. Marcus kept doing this terrible Bigfoot impression that made Sarah nearly pee herself laughing, and Leo was documenting everything on his phone despite the terrible lighting. The air smelled like pine and damp earth, and our breath came out in visible puffs. It felt like being a kid again, sneaking out, breaking arbitrary rules, feeling invincible. The trail opened up suddenly, and we found ourselves standing on a massive flat rock that jutted out over the valley like nature's balcony. And Leo was right, the view was incredible. The moon was nearly full, painting everything in silver and shadow. We could see for miles the dark shapes of mountains, the winding ribbon of a river, scattered lights from distant houses twinkling like fallen stars. "Okay, this was worth it," Sarah admitted, pulling out her phone for photos. We were all crowded near the edge, jostling for the best angle, when Leo went completely still beside me. "Guys," he said quietly, "look down there." He pointed to a clearing about 50 yards below our overlook. At first, I didn't understand what I was seeing. Then it clicked into focus. People, 6 or 7 of them standing in a perfect circle. They were wearing normal clothes, jeans, jackets, nothing weird, but something about the scene felt immediately viscerally wrong. They weren't moving. Not talking, not shifting their weight, nothing. They were just standing there in that geometric precision, and every single one of them was looking straight up at us. At that moment, the fun drained out of the night like someone had pulled a plug.
"What the hell?" Marcus whispered. None of us moved. We just stood there, frozen on our rock, staring down at the people who were staring up at us. The silence was thick and wrong. Even the normal forest sounds, insects, wind through leaves seemed to have stopped. "Maybe they're stargazing?" Sarah offered weakly, but her voice had that high, nervous pitch that meant even she didn't believe it. "In a circle? All facing the same direction?" Leo's hand was gripping my arm hard enough to hurt. "That's not stargazing." I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. There was something hypnotic about it, like watching a car accident unfold in slow motion. One of the figures was wearing a red jacket that stood out even in the moonlight. Another had blonde hair that caught the light. They looked so normal, so human. except for the absolute stillness and that unified, unwavering stare. Then, all at once, they started screaming. I don't have adequate words for that sound. It wasn't like someone scared or hurt. It was loud and rhythmic and guttural, a noise that came from somewhere deeper than throats, somewhere that shouldn't produce sound. It was synchronized perfectly, like they were one organism making one terrible noise. The sound echoed off the rocks and trees, surrounding us, getting inside our heads. "Go!" Leo shouted, and we went. We ran back down that trail like hell itself was chasing us. I lost my flashlight within the first 30 seconds and didn't care. Sarah was crying, Marcus was swearing in a continuous stream, and I could hear Leo's panicked breathing behind me as branches whipped our faces and roots tried to trip us. That screaming followed us, or maybe it was just echoing in my skull. I honestly couldn't tell. I fell twice. The second time I scraped my hands raw on rocks, but I was up and running again before I even processed the pain. All I could think was get to the car, get to the house, get away from here. When we finally burst out of the woods, we practically fell onto the driveway. The porch light looked like a beacon from heaven. We tumbled inside, and Leo immediately started locking everything: doors, windows, even the little window in the bathroom. We shoved a chair under the front door handle for good measure. Nobody slept. We sat in the living room with all the lights on, jumping at every sound until the sun finally came up. That's when Marcus looked out the window and went pale. Guys, on the hood of our car, centered perfectly, was a smooth, round stone. It was about the size of a baseball, darker than the local rocks, and sitting there like someone had placed it with intention. We packed in 15 minutes and left without even telling the Airbnb host why. I've never gone back to that part of the state, and I never will.
So there you have it. 3 true stories that prove sometimes the scariest things aren't hiding under your bed or in your closet. They're standing in clearings, blocking trails, and staring up at you from the darkness. What gets me about these stories is how normal everything started. Just friends looking for adventure, trying to have fun, living their lives. And then reality shifted on them in ways they'll never fully understand. The people in the circle who screamed in unison. The man who mimicked the ritual in that impossible dual voice. The impossibly tall figure with bare, wounded feet blocking the path. These experiencers didn't ask for these encounters. They just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Or maybe, just maybe, they were in exactly the place they were meant to be, and something wanted them to witness it. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had an experience in the woods that you couldn't explain? Ever felt like you were being followed or watched by something that wasn't quite human? Drop your stories in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed these stories, smash that like button, subscribe for more true horror content every week, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Until next time, stay safe out there, trust your instincts, and remember, not all trails lead home.